Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today with my top 5 games of 2016. This is my favorite time of the year. I keep a list on my desk of all the games I beat throughout the year, and I sit down, flip through some papers and think, which ones did I have the most fun with, which ones offered me the best experience, and so on. So what I'm gonna do is list my top 5 games, and then at the end I'll give some honorable mentions on games that I felt could have made the list but didn't. Mind you, this is my game of the year list, so if you have a different one, that's okay. Opinions, yeah. All right, let's get into this. Starting off with number 5, which was the hardest game to determine in this entire list because my top 4 were really solidified once the year had concluded, but there were so many different games competing for this spot. But at the end of the day, I went with Gears of War 4. Now, I'm not a huge Gears of War fan whatsoever. I've played the original trilogy, and I do see why people love it, but I didn't really understand that gung-ho love. With Gears of War 4, a brand new developer taking the helm of the series, I get it now. Seriously, this story was fantastic. It caught me by surprise, especially at the end. It's set up for a beautiful sequel. It's how game endings should really be done, where they don't cliffhang you, but they entice you to look forward to that next entry while still concluding the narrative that is happening within that first title. I love the brand new cast of characters that Gears of War 4 includes, but also how they bring back veterans and how they all mesh together. Seriously, it's a wonderful campaign, not only in the terms of story, but also with the way they handle set pieces. It's constantly throwing something new and refreshing your way where it doesn't get redundant like a lot of shooter campaigns do, and I really appreciate that they took that effort. Boss fights, big machines, and so on. There's a lot of things to see in this campaign, and it's well worth your time. Also, when you couple that in with the Horde mode, which the series is very well known for, which is just that classic you versus the Locust, and it just is so much fun. It's satisfying, but also now it relies more than ever on teamwork, especially with a class system involved that really focuses on player diversity and fitting that play style. They also did AI really well in Gears of War 4, but in these types of shooters, especially ones with Horde modes, for example, it's important that they're not just bum rushing you or letting you shoot them in the early rounds to be easy, but they're actually challenging you, taking cover and that type of stuff, and I thought Gears 4 did that exponentially well. Lastly is the 60 FPS multiplayer, which I play a decent amount of, surprisingly, given the fact that I've been playing a lot of multiplayer games this year. So to really give a game a lot of multiplayer time this year is a big compliment for me, and Gears of War 4 was one of them, which just had a very competent multiplayer mode. It really wasn't anything out of the ordinary compared to the rest of the series, but I just enjoyed it a lot more because the overall package was also much more enjoyable. It felt like Gears 4 had more of a focus on movement compared to just hunkering down in cover like in previous games, and I imagine that's because some of the executions involve yanking people over cover or hopping over cover towards them to stagger them. Stuff like this really changed how the game played in certain ways, and so I appreciated it a lot more compared to other Gears. Not to say that other Gears are bad, but just this one was one that really tickled my fancy. Coming in at number 4 is XCOM 2. Wow, this is, like I said in my review, a strategic masterpiece. This game is incredible. I can't think of any other game. I sat down when I got my review code for 4 hours the night of and just typed up character bios and gave them backstories to develop that personal connection. So when I started my campaign and I started drafting people to help fight with XCOM, that there was this instant personal connection. And when you're forming squads where it was me and my 3 best friends, it was like, I have to keep these people alive. And when they died, especially when they were a high level, they were one of your best soldiers, it was that gut-wrenching feeling of, I could load this game, but I know that I'd be doing the game wrong if I did. What's great about XCOM 2 is that it also focuses a lot on the customization in-game compared to XCOM 1, which was more about just the soldier in general and their level, where XCOM 2, you can change their tattoos, their face, their hair color, what they're wearing, all this types of stuff, their class. Considering this game really goes beyond just that bio and some basic customization and instead adds tons of different options to really tailor towards the person you're building them off of, I really could not appreciate that enough because it just made the world of a difference when I was going in as a squad. And also I had this really cool moment and idea where on Sugar Bomb, the site I help run, I included members of there into my XCOM team because I wanted to really fill it up as an army of my own. So it was a really cool moment there for me as well. I don't play XCOM for the story, but it definitely did have an improvement in the second one, but still, what was really the focus here was just that wonderful strategic gameplay where you were just clenching your butt cheeks as you were making that like 75% shot that if you missed, your guy was as good as dead. And there were so many moments like that scattered throughout that just naturally happen. Sometimes it would play out wonderfully, sometimes it would play out bad, and that's just the way the dice would roll, and that's what I love about the game so much. On top of that, XCOM 2 has a plethora of mods to pick from, and I know you guys who love Bethesda Game Studios games love mods, and XCOM 2 is a very well supported game when it comes to mods, so it can really alter your experience. I mean, there's tons of different ones that include like new levels, new customization items, so that when you are actually creating someone, you have mods to help tailor to that person you're building even more, which is fantastic, and so on. Really, the mod support for this game is great and really has extended its life, and also it's highly replayable on top of that. Coming in at number 3 might be one that I think a lot of people will be conflicted with, but for me, I just couldn't help but put this within my top 3, and that's Ratchet & Clank. Ratchet & Clank is a series I've loved to death my entire life. Now, I know some people look at this and go, well, Matty, it's just kind of like a reboot. It's really just the first one, but built from the ground up. But that's the thing. It's a whole new game, although it's based off the first one, but it's also sort of based off the movie in a way. Really, it's the game based off the movie, based off the game or something along those lines, I think was the catchphrase for it. And I really liked the way they went with Ratchet & Clank. This game series, this formula of running through these levels, upgrading weapons, having the charismatic cast, still lives up to this day, along with the fun and enjoyable MIDI games. It was wonderful to see one of my favorite franchises growing up still being loved so much today, showing that it still has plenty of life ahead of it, unlike other series I've grown up with, such as Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper, which we haven't heard of in a long while. So it's great to see that one of at least my pieces of my childhood has carried into the present and is doing so well. But not only that, it's just a highly replayable game. 3 times I beat it, ladies and gentlemen, 3 times. Now I beat in a total of 33 games this year, but you could really say 36 because of the amount of times I beat Ratchet & Clank. And I don't really sit down and do a new game plus or a new game plus plus. I know some people will do that, for example, with Souls games, but for me, it's not all that often and I sit down for the new game plus unless I'm really hooked. And Ratchet & Clank was a game I actually got the platinum trophy for, and it really wasn't even the platinum that was keeping me hooked in. I was just playing this game endlessly. I wanted to upgrade everything. I wanted to see everything, get all the gold bolts and all that stuff, and just damn, this game was beautiful from top to bottom. At number 2 is, surprise surprise, Final Fantasy 15. This is a game that really shocked me because the opening hours were a slow crawl, to say the least. I really wasn't relatively impressed, but it was when the game really got going, once you got into the Dusky region, and it really just opened up. There were tons of activities to do. It really showed just how big this game is. What I love about Final Fantasy 15 is that not only is it a Final Fantasy game, but it really is a true open world game. It's loaded with distractions, random things to do. So for example, you'll be questing, you'll see a place to fish, you'll start fishing, then you'll be running back to your quest and you'll find a place where you can race chocobos. I guess I'll do that. You'll constantly be stopped with little distractions that will just keep you going throughout the world. It also has some of the best dungeons I've seen in a JRPG, where usually they're just reskinned cells of the same thing you've seen earlier in the title, but each one was unique and different and offered one of the royal arms at the end to power up, which was a thing called the Armiger, which was almost like Noctis's final form, so to say, which is something that Kingdom Hearts fans may recognize, where you just absolutely kick the shit out of everything. The gameplay was fast-paced, it was fun learning the patterns of other enemies, so I knew when to counter, when to dodge, and it eventually became this really empowering experience. And while the gameplay will steal a lot of the show, I really like the story in Final Fantasy 15. Now I know there was that issue with chapter 13 where someone passes on who is sort of key to the story and they didn't really explain why, and they said, well, we're gonna patch it in, which yes, is a lazy piece of development. And while that does bug me a little bit, if you're honest with yourself, this character wasn't crazy important towards the end of the main story and you really saw it coming. It didn't need too much explanation, it would just make sense to explain why. But regardless, not getting caught up in that, this is a game that at the end I was in tears because it is just such an emotional game, because you really feel the brotherly love between Noctis, Prompto, Gladiolus, and Ignis, and they're just tight and unique in their own way. And to see this story conclude was just such a beautiful, wonderful thing, and it made me feel so many different things, which games don't tend to get me too emotional, although I'm heavily invested in them. Just So this was a really unique experience for me personally. On top of that, that music, I mean, oh my goodness, you got every single Final Fantasy soundtrack in there on top of Final Fantasy 15's, which was one of the best I've heard in recent memory. I mean, oh, this game, dude. Like I said before, Final Fantasy 15 does live up to the motto it sets at the beginning of the game, which is a Final Fantasy game for fans and first timers, which is something that I think is very remarkable to see. A lot of people have passed on Final Fantasy because of its tactical nature, because it's for weebs and so on, but I'm glad to see that the JRPGs are beginning to bridge that gap to Western fans and invite them in while not losing their sense of identity. And finally, at number 1, Matty's Game of the Year. Gee, what could it be? He only talks about it all the time. Yes, my Game of the Year is Overwatch, and that shouldn't be too much of a surprise. I mean, this is a game I've put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours with my friends. We squad up almost every single night of the week. It was like a college ritual to just decompress and play some Overwatch after a long, stressful day. This game is incredible. Why do I love it so much, especially when I don't like multiplayer games only? In fact, I flamed Star Wars Battlefront partially because of the fact that it was multiplayer only and shallow. So why is Overwatch getting a much better treatment for me? Well, yes, Overwatch is based off of 2 game modes, but for me personally, I feel like the game modes are really the cast of heroes that it has, which each play unique and in different ways. You have Symmetra, for example, who's a support who has been overhauled, who can now play a lot more aggressive, or Lucio, who can sit back and heal the team, and Mercy, who's designed just to strictly heal, Ana, who can play a little bit more offensive, boost your teammates, or maybe you want to play as a tank with Reinhardt, who's more of the melee character. He's very heavy, he's designed to soak up a lot of damage, or perhaps D.Va, who can play a lot more aggressive in your face, maybe Zarya, who's designed to just kind of poke at enemies back and forth and shield their teammates until they're fully charged, then play a lot more aggressively. Each of these heroes has their own set play style that makes them so much different from one another. Each one of these heroes is not only well designed, but fun to play, where I'm always enjoying switching up my cast of heroes. The maps are fun and balanced, competitive is always intense. Overwatch at times does struggle with its fair matchmaking, but for the most part, I find myself in games where I'm ranked the same as my opponents, which I think is really important in competitive shooters. It has a real sense of personality with its animations, its comics, as well as the in-game lines, emotes, and so on. On top of that, the updates for Overwatch, such as seasonal events that really show the game can adapt, try new things that make it not only a serious shooter in the terms of competitive, but you can have Mei Snowball fight, for example, and that's something that's just a ton of fun. Overwatch is a game I will be playing for years. That's another reason why it is number 1 on my Game of the Year list. This is not a game that I'm just temporarily enjoying. It's just some good old multiplayer fun. No, ladies and gentlemen, this is a game I'm into for the long run. I've put so much time into it. I love unlocking the skins and stuff. It's just a good time to play. I know because it's so loved, some people can be highly critical of it, but to be honest with you, I just totally ignore that because I absolutely love everything about this game. So those are my top 5 games of the year, and I hope you guys enjoy. I know that I've made some picks on this list that maybe you'll find questionable. They're a little bit more obscure, but it's my list, so, you know, who cares, right? Anyway, I'd love to hear your list and see what you guys have been enjoying throughout the entire year in the comments down below. I'm hoping to beat the number of 33 next year and maybe push and break into the 40s now that I have a lot more time, because I was balancing school at the same time as trying to play all these games for you guys to review, but hopefully I'll be able to push things forward in 2017. So I hope you guys are looking forward to that. And once again, I'd love to hear your Game of the Year list, so be sure to leave them in the comments down below. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook. The links are, as always, in the description down below. Check out triggerbomb.com, the place by Bethesda fans for Bethesda fans. Other than that, stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.